Um, Nancy, how do
All
I
right,
take it off?
go back to it and click it again. All right, welcome everybody. Like I said before, a couple of people called to cancel because they actually got appointments to get vaccines this morning. So I thought that was a really good reason to cancel. So we're recording this because they really wanted to get the information. I sent out an agenda to everybody. Oh, here's Miriam. I sent out an agenda to everybody. So you have all the dates of the upcoming meetings. The only two really important dates right now are January 15th, which is the end of the armchair travel for architecture around the world. So just keep that in your mind. And the review session for this meeting will be on Zoom, 3:30 in the afternoon on January 29th. And it says here, images have to be to me by the 23rd.
What month?
Hey, Lorraine, January 23rd for the January 29th meeting. Welcome, Lorraine.
Right.
Welcome, Miriam, wherever
Hi.
you are. There you go. Okay, so the rest of the information is here on the agenda. Now, I want to point out to you that I'm working with Meg. You know, we don't have our website anymore, so we don't have that big listing of future meetings and stuff like that. I'm transferring all that information slowly to the Valencia Falls website. Already the galleries are there. If you haven't looked at the galleries, you should go and look at them. Under social, you go to videos and photographs, photography, photo gallery, and there you will see all our wins outside of Valencia Falls and all the cafe pictures from previous years, and from now going forward, those will all be there. The very cool thing is you can make comments, which is really nice for the photographers to see what people think about their pictures. And before we didn't have that ability. So under each image, there's a place for comments. You make the comment, it goes to Doris for clearance, Doris and Eileen, who are administering the site, to make sure that, you know, it's not a nasty comment, obviously, which I know nobody's going to do. But anyhow, and then they stamp it okay, and it then will appear in the gallery. So please use that function so that people will, you know, have some appreciation for how the community sees their art. Okay. The other thing that I'm doing, I'm working with Meg, and we're transferring the, I always was keeping our information on the website calendar, but I'm doing even more now. So for example, with the photography show and the judging period, all of that's on the Valencia Falls website. When the images are due, when the judging closes, it's all there. And the way that you can see it easily is you go to social calendar, and then when the calendar comes up for the month, you hover, you make it to be the month that you want. And on the left side, there's a drop-down window. You click on the drop-down window, you go to photography, and everything disappears, and only photography will be there. So it's much easier to view the dates. On the dates, when you click on an activity, I'm putting in exactly what's happening on that date. There's a place for description, but it's very limited. So I have to sort of pick and choose what words I use. But for example, if you forgot when the images are due for this review, you can go and click on the review date, and that information will be there. Okay. And don't get upset if it's not there. It's just because she and I are working on it, because the first time I sent it, I sent sentences, and there's a limit, a character limit. So now I have to go back to the old ones that I did before, but the newer ones are correct. And the other thing is that there's a place on the right side where you can save it to your own personal calendar. So if you're a person that keeps a calendar on your smartphone or on your computer, not me, but people do that, and you click on that, it will go automatically to your calendar, and you'll get a reminder of a meeting. So that's a really nice function we did not have before. So I would advise you that that's a really good thing to do, to start using the Valencia Falls website to get your information about this group and the things this group is going to be doing. And I have the schedule on there all the way through the March meeting. So all the way through March 14th, I'm waiting on the April dates, and then our season is over. So it's all there. You can, start using it as a reference. Okay, so that covered that. Okay, the only other business we have here before we're going to go into our meeting on our educational portion is about the photography show. So as you know, if you've been following the emails, we've been going back and forth, and we finally, we meaning Ira, Anne, myself, and Marty Goldstein, who are been working on getting the photography show together for this first ever digital version. And we made some changes in how the sizing that you could use, et cetera, et cetera. So you all should have the most up-to-date information on submitting your images. If for some reason you didn't print it out when I sent it to you, you have two options. You can go to the Valencia Falls website, go to clubs, go to photography study group, and it's right there. You just scroll down and you'll find the submission information. If that's too much for you and you would like your own personal copy, if you email me at 8050@AOL.com, I will email it back to you. So I'm encouraging you guys. I would really like this to be a stupendous show. You're doing it from your seated position. You don't have to go to Costco. You don't have to make labels. This is so much easier. I really want to see a nice turnout. Okay. Don't forget that you have been going through your images to submit them for the monthly slideshow. So you have all for 6 or 7 months already. You each have 4 to 5 images that you selected from your body of work that you can look at and maybe decide from some of those. For those of you that submitted images to me for Israel, there's even more that you've been looking at. So you can look and find those as well. So you should have easy access to images to submit for this show, all right? And so if you have any questions, we need to know. Now, Anne is gonna be doing all the electronic portions. I sent you information about how it's going to work. So you have that, and it's again on the agenda in case you missed that. If you have a question, let's say you have a picture and you're not sure it's good enough, or whether you should crop it a different way or do something to it, send it to one of us, to Ira, to me, to Anne, and we'll critique it for you and send it back. That's during your process of making your selection. So from January 4th to January 16th, and we need to do it this way, otherwise we're going to be inundated. For that window, okay, you can send us anything. I don't care if you send me 10 images. I'll look at all of them for you. Eva, you're accepted. You'll send me 25. So send me no more than 10. If you want me to look at them and say, okay, I think this is terrific, not so sure about this one, or this one might be great if you cropped it, or whatever we used to do in those mentoring sessions. Because if those of you that remember, Kit and I used to sit in the lobby of the social hall, and you could bring as many pictures as you wanted, and we looked at those for you and gave you suggestions of how to make them a little bit better. So please feel free to use us for that. Okay, we're offering you our help. So use us for that, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can, and then you can make your final decisions. From January 17th, and again, you don't have to write this down, it's on the handout, to the 23rd, there's an opportunity for you if you cannot resize your images correctly. If you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to put the names on the images, that's your window for asking one of us to help you. That's Ira or I. We're happy to help you. Do not send me images on January 24th. Do not send me images on January 16th. The 17th to the 23rd. Please, otherwise we're going to be swamped. We tried to make a construct here that's going to allow us to get through this process. All right. And then January 25th to February 8th, you can send your images. I am begging you, do not wait till February the 8th. Anne is going to be getting 100% of these images. She has to sort them. She has to get the names of the images over to Paul Hirschman to create a spreadsheet. She has to do all of this. And if you're sending in images that need a correction or something's wrong, she's going to send them back to you, and then you have to resubmit them. So send them in at the beginning of the period. right? We're not going to punish anybody. We want all these images to be in this show, okay? Is that getting clear? Is that clear enough? It's the regular amount of images. 4 general images, 2 creative images if you want to. Even if you have 1 image, Pat, or some of the newer people, even if you only have 1 image, send the 1 image, who cares? But you can send up to 4 general, up to 2 creative. Again, if you're not sure what's creative, what's general, ask us, all right? Is that clear? I don't know how else to say it. Just don't, please, please, don't bombard us at midnight on the last day of submission. We're only human beings and we're all involved in other things. So please, all right, use our help wisely. The only other thing that Anne asked me to reinforce, because she couldn't be with us today, is if you're going to make combined images, after last year, or maybe even last year, we started allowing the people that knew how to do it to combine images. So for example, if you're in the intermediate class and you want to change the sky in an image, you can do that as long as it was your own sky. So you can use editing tools if you know how to combine images. You are not allowed to use somebody else's pieces or something you got from the internet or something you got from software. That I don't want that, okay? There is probably no way for us to tell whether you did that or not. We're just depending on everybody being honest about it, all right? So again, we're not going to teach you how to do that. But if you know how, it's okay. Right? Are there any questions about this?
Oh, yeah, me.
Go, Miriam.
Photoshop's new sky replacement feature, would that fall into the parameters? Because let's say the picture you have is great, but like I was at the Israel Museum during the rain and I took iPhone pictures and I had a bald sky and whitish grayish sky.
Are you replacing it with your own sky that you took some other day?
No.
Then no, it's not. I just said
Okay,
that.
fine.
No
Fine.
things from software.
Okay, it's good enough to
because there are
use for
people
the other
that
class.
have taken like all kinds of sky pictures and just put them in a folder someplace. And then when you want to replace the sky, you just pull that sky out and put it in behind your image. And that's fine.
Okay.
No software skies, please.
Okay, and I just needed to get that clarified.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
Adrian, I have a question. It might be on the instructions, which I haven't read yet.
That's okay.
If you're submitting creative, do we need to submit the exact steps that we took
Okay,
to
good
make that
question,
creation?
Doris. And I actually wrote that on the agenda, so you'll find that there as well. But no, for those of you who have never submitted to the show before, in previous years, if somebody was going to do a creative image, we asked them to show the original image and to tell us, or images if they combine images, and tell us how they did it for educational purposes, so that people that came to the show could see, oh my goodness, look what they did. And we displayed all of them side by side. We're not doing that digitally. That would be a nightmare for us. We just don't have the people to do that. So if you're doing creative, you only have to send in the final product.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and again, remembering it's all your own pieces, no pieces from other places. Right? That was a good question. Anybody else have a question? Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to do is start our educational portion. The people that are doing the educational portion today are Eva, Miriam, and myself. And so I'm going to do a little brief overview to tell you where we're going, so you can put it all in some kind of framework. Eva's going to start. She's going to give you general information about shadows and their impact on your images, how they make your images more dramatic and more artistic is the best word I can think of. But anyhow, she's going to be talking about that. Miriam's going to be talking about shadows and the time of day and what happens when you crop an image different ways and how that affects the impact of the shadows. I'm going to talk about chiaroscuro photography, which is something from art, and that came down through the centuries from the Renaissance period as a way images are taken, created, made, whatever, for impact, for certain kinds of impact. And then I'm going to do practical information about how you can do this yourself, either with a camera or a smartphone. And I have images showing you exactly how to do it. And for those of you that are interested, and with minimal equipment, I don't have a remote flash. I'm not using anything except for a tripod and a flashlight. And I can show you how that happens, that you can actually have fun and try to create some of these yourself in the next week or so that you could actually submit. Hi, Sam.
Question.
Yes.
Are you recording the session?
I am.
Good.
No problem. Okay. And just for those of you that might be wanting to write it down, the tripod that I use on my smartphone is a UB size, the letter U, B like a bumblebee, size like the size of something, phone tripod that I got from Amazon when we were supposed to go to the museum last spring and do smartphone photography. A couple of us bought those, and it was at that time it was like $18. I just looked it up. It's $24. And it comes, it's very cool. And I don't want to waste time later doing that, so I wanted to do that now. It's very cool. It has an adaptable plate. So any size smartphone fits in there. And it comes with an adapter for your iPad. So you can put your iPad on it. And it comes with a remote trigger. So if you're doing photography that, and you don't want to be touching the smartphone to take the picture because it's on a time release or whatever, it's on an extended shutter, you have a remote with this. All right. So it is totally worth it. In fact, for those of you that that watched the Hadassah installation when they did it, Mike Schwartz and Barbara did a musical segment, and I lent Jason that tripod to use. And he came back to me and said, this is really cool. So just so you know, it's very, very easy, low tech.
What's the name of it?
It's called UB Size.
UB.
The letter U, the word BEE, size, SIZE. It's all combined to be one word, UB Size.
VIEWBEESIZE.
Yeah, the letter U.
Okay.
Phone tripod, and it's 50-inch extendable. That's what this one is that I have. And you'll see a picture of it when I'm showing my portion. Okay, so let's go to the screen share and have Eva start.
Get my coffee.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming online today, or rather in front of your iPad or PC, to view our photographs that we have been assigned, which the subject is using shadows creatively. And later on, Miriam is going to join in, as well as Adrian. If you happen to have opened up the message that Adrian has sent you, I wrote like a 1 page and then a half a page, a second page about some of the features I want you all to see today. And having studied at the High School of Art and Design since I was 14 and taking photography later in college, I always look at life in color with size, proportion, softness or starkness, distinct, blurry, happy, sad, or light and dark. I'd like to ask you, Adrian, is there anywhere I can see my own image? Because right now I see Sam. I'm talking about in the little square on the bottom.
Everybody should see a screen share now. Are you all seeing a screen share?
Yes.
Yes.
So
Can
all
I
you see is that. There's nothing else I can do.
Okay, so I'm looking at Brenda. Is there anywhere I can see myself so I know that
Yeah.
I'm moving in front of the camera the right way?
Try to arrow down or first put it on gallery view and then arrow up and arrow down on the column.
Are you on your phone? Are you on your phone?
No, she's
On my
iPad.
iPad.
Okay.
Put it on speaker view.
Yeah, put on speaker view.
I don't have that. I have mute, stop video, share screen. Maybe I should do share screen.
Now look on the
Oh.
top right.
No,
There's
you're
a
sharing
word-
with Adrian's screen.
There's a word view on the top right corner with a bunch of squares, and click on that and you could change the way the
I have
people
two
are.
screens, so I can't tell you.
There's a place
She
that
could also
says
pin
switch
it.
camera.
No, you
Well-
need gallery view.
It's
Okay.
okay. I don't need to see myself. I'm just
Okay,
surprised
go.
that I'm not, because I did this review yesterday with Adrian. So I can see that when I speak, what I'm pointing to. All right, to
Eva,
continue.
you can pin yourself.
I don't think she knows how to do that, Carl. Let her
It's
keep
in the
going.
upper right-hand corner.
I got it. I got it.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you all. Folks, I want to say that without Adrian's help, nurturing, support, encouragement, I would not have been able to do that. She has been such a beacon of light to many of us, but especially to me, because using iPhone photography, I do things just a little bit different. So I'm going to show you today various materials that I've taken my camera, my iPhone camera, and it shows designs, folds, wrinkles, sheen, softness, hardness, and contrast. Traditionally, one thinks of shadows as shown in the sun, or a subject highlighted by a brilliant sun or a lamp. And as the shadow is on the ground on the wall, it makes a stark copy of the original, but often it's a different size, a different shape, and usually it almost looks like a gray tone. Shadows change constantly as the sun moves around the earth, and if you take the same image morning and afternoon, it often looks different. As a source of light moves, sometimes the shadows disappear entirely, and I'll show you images on that. So catching the light is very important. In front of you, you'll see a vase. I have this vase in my living room, and as you can see, it is shadowed with a much larger, thicker, wider image. And also, because this particular vase has got a sort of a folded filigree cutout on the top, the images of that is shown on the vase itself. And if I could, I know I can't. If you go closer in the image, you can see the grain of the vase. This particular vase looks that way in the late afternoon as the sun comes from my circular window over the door. But I have another image not shown today that I've taken in the morning. And lucky for me, I'm able to get both sides of the coin, both morning and afternoon images. In flowers, which you're going to see in a few minutes, you can almost feel how soft the petals are. And when I take my camera and show glass, you can see how hard or translucent it is. And skin and hair has its own texture, as does wicker, iron, weave, silver, fabric, and others. Next slide. Again, this is an indoor shot right in my home. Natural light comes from outdoors. I love the way the sun enlarged the image of the wrought iron chair as it showed and flashed that image onto the side wall. Both this and the previous shot, I've changed black and white. Here you'll see both images in color and in black and white. Again, the sun came in and the image was caught on the wall. These images are so fleeting. They only lasted for 1 week approximately. I can no longer get that light in that same window again till sometime next November. Next. Here's another interior shot, and this is the window in my bathroom. The design was done by my previous owner, but please notice the shadows that are shown from the trees outside, visible through the glass, and also the bars of the window panes as they shadow onto the curvature of the window. Again, here, your most focus is on the window and it's broken or visually seemingly broken pieces of glass, which are not, it's just painted on, but also the shadows from outside and within. Next. I'm at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, and they have a beautiful display of vases, and I caught this shot. I love black and white. This is the natural color. It has not been changed to black and white, obviously, because the vases are black and white. And you will see the shadow of the box as it goes up and across and down. That is almost like a vignette. And then the shadow of the left vase on the wall. And the juxtaposition of the shapes and the design on the vases were really appealing to me. Next. Thank you. Adrienne, I just submitted this to her yesterday because I was looking for other images and I came across, this is a monolith that I caught at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boca, or the Boca Museum of Art. And had I only showed you the left image, you couldn't comprehend what that was. But here I have a small image on the bottom. Look carefully how these pre-drilled holes cause shadows from the overhead light. And although the holes are all different, they all have the same thing, an interior view that goes into a perspective of darkness. Next. In this image, I tried to show fabrication and the views under a mannequin wearing a hat. This obviously works as well on real people who are wearing hats. The hat would usually get the light from overhead lights or the sun, and the face is usually in shadow. But if you look carefully, you will see that the shadows of the fabric, of the garment, and its texture is very visible because of the shadows. And can you go back, Adrienne?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And on the right-hand side, the mannequin is wearing a little pocketbook with beads. It looks like it's made out of wicker, as is the purse itself. And you can see every detail delineated there, and with the shadows under the hand. The original color is on the left, and on the right, I've changed it to black and white. Next. Here is a photograph. It's a real flower. It's part of an arrangement I received for Mother's Day last spring. And if you can see, the petals are hiding one behind the other. And you can see the shadows underneath the petals. And I think it's a very attractive black and white image of something that's very soft to the touch. Thank you. Next. This image may be very familiar to you. It is outside of our pool in our own Valencia Falls community. And here early in the morning, the sun is dappling through the trees and a filigree of shadow happens on the wall behind it. As well as if you look under the chairs and the table, you will see the image of the filigree of the wrought iron on the floor. Here is a perfect example of shadows and how light from an overhead location, meaning the sun, will show you the shadows. And as the sun moves around, the shadow may disappear and be eliminated entirely. Next. This photograph is of a subject on a table in a store selling furniture. I often go to furniture stores. I love to look at their accessories. And you can see even something as simple as a little ornament, an accessory on the table can cast its own shadow, not only on the bottom, but inside the swirl, the curve. Obviously, I've changed this to black and white because it gives me what I'm looking to display today. The starkness and the clean lines. Next. I took this image just about 2 weeks ago as my family and I walked on a pier on Singer Island. And this is like a bulwark that held on to the bridge, which was almost like a causeway across the intercoastal until you get to the beach. And here, if you look closely, the first layer is actual metal. But the second layer is the shadow of that metal on a stone pier. And when you look at it, it's got the grid effect, but if you look carefully, you can see the shadow also on the pieces of rock, which were like nuggets against the pier. I think this is a perfect expression of shadows. Here we were having ice cream down on Atlantic Avenue in Delray, and there's a beautiful ice cream shop, and the chairs are bright green. This is natural color, it's not doctored, and you can see the holes, the filigree come right onto the seat. Again, a perfect example using the light of the sun to give us shadows. Next. Now I'm going to show you a couple of features that I found on the ground, on the floor of the Civic Center as I walked around the day I had my COVID not the COVID vaccination, but the one that allows you to know if you have the disease or not. And of course, I was positive. It was an experience. It took quite a long time. And I'm taking a picture of the smallest thing that I have in this presentation, which is an acorn. And it's brilliant sun that day. It's early morning. And if you look at the field of the shadow, which is circular, the acorn is oblong, and the shadow of the stone alongside the acorn, as well as inside the shadow, have texture and depth. So even the smallest thing can be photographed and it will have its own shadow. Next. Walking around, I took a picture of this beautiful bank. And if you can see, the arches represent the light shining directly on the arches, while the arches within the corridor are in shadow. Here's an example of sun shining and illuminating the front of the building, but the interior is in shadow. As well as on the right-hand image, you can see that the sun shining on the front part of the bank is one kind of color. And as the building turns and makes an acute corner, sharp angle, it's in the darkness. And thus it's a different color. So shadows are all around you and can make things look dimensional. For the word dimensionability that Irene Hill had spoken about, it brings the photograph forward and makes it three-dimensional. Next. Here's a photograph of Whimsy that I thought was adorable. I caught this twig on the floor and the shadow was very distinct. So I carried it along to a hole, an actual hole in the pavement. And this twig ends up having a little tiny mouth, and it almost looks like an animal or some kind of creature walking over to the mouth of maybe a water hole or something. Again, you'll see that the lines crisscross and angle, and yet even in the darkness, the pavement in the lower level of the image is distinctive for its shadow. I thought this was funny. I hope I tickled your funny bone. Next. Here are two images. The left is a photograph I originally highlighted, but that you may not know where it comes from. This is a Civic Center building, and this is an optical illusion. It is not the shadow of the glass that is a decorative design on the building. Every part of that ochre on the left and the light green on the right are actually painted by an artisan, so it looks like a shadow. So in this photograph, I've shown you that sometimes even shadows can be represented as art. Next. Another acorn that was opened on the ground, and I zeroed in on it again with my iPhone to show you the distinct features of the grains of the acorn interior, all cleaned up, maybe by a squirrel, and the ground where every pebble that's built in and, how do I say, hardened into concrete has its own shadow. So I think of this as a perfect image of what shadows are, no matter what size. If you have a source of light, you will also have shadows. Next. This, you may know, is green K. And on brilliant days, again in the morning, the sun filters through the fencing and the bench. And there's a perspective here on the left, on the right side. And as you can see that even though it's different angles, as the sun comes in, it causes different shadows. And another image showing you that you can find shadows anywhere and everywhere you go. Outside of the French bakery is this table and chairs. It's brilliant red and it's beautiful even without shadow. For a while, the sun came in and out, and I quickly lifted my phone and I waited for the sun to come out. And as you can see, the bottom image has the shadows, again showing the filigree of the back of the seat and the shadow underneath the table. This is an example where shadows make something look three-dimensional. Next. Last week, the Cornell Museum of Art had a lovely display on paper, also a display of costumes from the Boca Ballet. And I thought that this particular tutu shows how interior light, maybe two different interior lights set apart a few feet, can cause different images on the wall. But if you look at the shadow, it almost looks like it's back to back to the mannequin, which again is an optical illusion, but shadows always surprised me. Next. Along with the beautiful costumes, unfortunately the exhibition closed on Sunday, are these beautiful ballet slippers. You can see the fabric, it's sheen. You can see the depth of the shadow inside the slipper. You can see from multiple overhead lights that the ballet slippers are shadowed on the box it was sat on. But what I love is the way the ribbon filigrees and causes its own shadow. So here's something soft and shiny that is depicted showing its own shadows. Nature often has shadows, and as the sun moves around, it causes different shadows throughout the day. Our beautiful Delray Beach front and seafront is an example of where shadows are always around you, from the pillars to the rope swinging from one pillar to another, to the plantings growing on the right. Again, this is early morning, and you can see the shadows on the sand. Next. I love flowers and greenery, and how because of the way they grow, they illuminate shadows or not illuminate light on various aspects of the image. And here you see how the petals of this particular plant and the leaves are causing shadows direct from another overhead plant above it. Next. I showed you the acorn before. Here is a shadow of an image that I had displayed at one of the photography shows some years ago. This is an actual building. Actually, it's a trio of buildings in the city of Tel Aviv in Israel. The center building was the first to be built, and the other two from overhead are a square and a triangle. See how deep the shadow is presented from the circular building. This complex was designed by I.M. Pei, who designed the entrance to the Louvre Museum in Paris. And every window is a real window, and the sheen of the sun is on the building. So here you see shadows in a very large proportion by a 55-story building. This is a plaza, Boca Raton, on the corners of 441 and Glades Road. There's a numerous group of restaurants there. I recently just discovered this plaza. I had never been there, and there was a group of chairs, but there was no sun. Because it had no sun, I have a mostly one-dimensional image of chairs across a parapet of different types of flooring. Some are grain, some are flat. I waited and waited, but the sun didn't come out. So here you could see a photograph. Although it's interesting and lovely, without the sun, I don't really have shadows, just very mildly below the left-hand chair. Next. In the search of shadows, I love to take pictures that are very exciting. And this photograph is actually almost of an all beige vase sitting on a night table in a model home over in one of the communities near here. It has a slight shadow on the bottom, but using the edit on my phone, I found out that I can change the color so magnificently. And here I can say, I can probably submit this for reflections. So what I'm saying is, in one hand, I was working on one project, but I found something that may work for a future project. Next. And this is my last image. This image is of a dock that just moments ago, my grandchildren ran across and up and down and jumped into the water. Behind me, to the left and right, is our outdoor deck chairs and people frolicking. And I was able to separate this image from the rest of the group. I zeroed in with my camera because this is a perfect shadow picture. You have three elements here. You have the sand that's very soft and changes all the time as people walk on it and has deep shadows. You have the dock, which is hard, made out of wood, and you have the shadow below it, and then you have the soft water. You have three planes here. Each one offers you its own shadow. So hopefully when it's time to send your pictures for review for our review session, you'll go out and focus your camera and take beautiful shadows. And hopefully I offered you something this morning that you had enjoyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. Miriam.
Okay, before I start showing my pictures, I made some notes of things to tell you. I did that last night because I thought it's significant. For example, there was a difference between a shadow and a silhouette. Because some people might think because an object has all surrounded by in black that it's a shadow, but it isn't necessarily so. A silhouette is a dark shape, an outline of someone or something visible against a lighter background, particularly in dim light. So, take that in consideration. Highlights and shadows, like Eva was talking about, help us see the dimensionality of the objects. Shadows can be deep in tone and have a hard to find edge, or can be broad, soft, and with a feathered, almost imperceptible edge. The closer you are to the object, the larger the light on the object, the softer the light appears on the object, the bigger and softer shadows you have. The inverse is true. The further you are away, you get the opposite. Except if the light comes from an angle, the object will catch a longer shadow the further away it is from the light source, and will have a hard edge due to the proximity of what's called the penumbra and the umbra. The shadows are made up of two parts. They're called penumbra, the darkest part of the shadow where all the light gets blocked by the object, and penumbra is when the light source is big enough that part of its light go past the object. If you only have a single point like the sun, there's only a penumbra, in other words, dark shadows, but you don't have something extend past the object. And if you have more than an object, like Eva was showing you with different vases, the shadows can crisscross somewhere between the light and the object. Okay. Shadows start to lighten as they move away from objects because of the extra light bouncing around the environment. For example, walls or other objects. In which case, if you're doing editing, you can apply, if you're advanced enough, you can apply a gradient mask to it. The earlier hours of the day and the later hours of the day are better for texture and form of shadow. Shadows in the early morning and the late afternoon, when the sun is lower in the sky, are long and thin. As the sun climbs higher, the shadows become shorter and darker. When you have a shadow falling across another object, you have two objects, it needs to follow the contours of the object, and the amount of shadow is where the two shadows meet and tends to be increased. Now, as far as to get shadows, you can do backlighting for shadows. You can do selective lighting. You can manipulate shadows by changing the shape of the object. And you can have color, like the stained glass Eva was talking about. If you can also do shadows from multiple colors, because they intersect and you end up with a different color. You can have shadows being the subject of a photograph to tell a story, to enhance a visual power of a photograph, evoke a certain mood. You can have shadows that distort. You can have shadows that act as abstract images, or as symbols to create concepts. Strong shadow can strengthen a composition, and you can see all the contours and look for minimalist simplicity. Shadows can convey emotion, and I already talked about the silhouettes and shadows. You can use simple shapes to make like Eva did with flowers. You can do graphic designs. You can do sharp lines. You can use people in shadows. You can use leading lines, patterns, curves that guide the eye into the scene or to create a balance of negative and positive space. Also, shoot in black and white if you want. For the advanced people, you can use manual mode on your camera, use the EV compensation. That means to either make the picture lighter or darker to the left of the center. There's a scale in the center of your viewfinder, so you could move that to make a picture lighter or darker, or you can lock the exposure. There's a button on the back of the camera, and you can bracket, which means you set it up beforehand to take 3 shots, 1 lighter, 1 normal, and 1 lighter, that are, you can see it on the scale of the camera that when you bracket after you've taken the shot, that the pictures are either lighter or regular at 0 or at plus like 1/3, let's say, of a stop. Also, if you keep the sun to the side of the camera, if you want the sun to sweep across the scene and reveal texture, like let's say you're in the Sahara Desert, for example, and you take a shot off from the side and the sun sweeps across with the shadow. Shooting toward the sun or other light source makes the shadow seem to point to race to the camera position. So anyway, now I'm going to go to my pictures and talk about the time of day.
Pahokee still comes through,
Okay.
no matter what I do.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, this is from around our pool area. This is in the morning. Now, the pictures on the left are cropped to 11 by 14. So you see that the distance to the shadow
Hi,
varies.
Joel, I don't know if you're home. I called you at home. How's it going?
Hello?
Gloria,
mute
yeah,
yourself,
to be on,
please?
I muted her.
Okay,
You're good. I muted her.
okay. When you're closer, as I said before, the shadows change in their strength. So when you've cropped it, it looks different. Okay, it's the same shot. The one on the right is a 3:2 ratio, and the other one, and apparently it looks, for some reason, it looks stronger on the and or at least bigger. They're still soft. Go to the next one. Okay, that's the fence, I think, by the pool. It's also in the morning. And you see the leading lines and things going off at an angle because I use the fence to get the shadow. Okay, and there's varying shapes. You can go to the next one. Okay, that's also a shadow of a fence. I don't think that's here. I think that may be down in Delray. But apparently, this is down in Delray in the park, the park at Delray by the bridge. And this was in the morning. And you see the angle, because I shot it at an angle where the shadow goes off on an angle. You also see the shadows from the trees that are in the back, that I forget what you call it, dappled light. Is that dappled
Yeah,
light in a way?
dappled light. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because of the trees that are there. Okay, next. This is also in the same park, and you see how the wheels of the bicycle get reflected in a shadow based on the fact of how the wheels are positioned. I believe that shadow is coming from the front wheel. Okay, next. There's a lady in that little pavilion in the park who is doing an exercise class with several students. And you see the shadows that come off of the position of her legs. Okay. This is a bench not far from the park. And you see the dappled light that comes off of the bench. And you also see that, you know, in the triangular area of the bench that that is on the top edge is a triangular area. There's shadows reflected inside. You see that from the left leg of the bench near where you sit, there's a triangle. Go to the bench, where
Yep.
you sit. Now go south just a little bit. Go below the bench, there's a
here.
triangle, okay? And based on the shape of the items, of the geometric shape of the bench, you get particular types of shadows, curves. And this happens to be me in the parking lot. So, you know, you can get a shadow of yourself, and I actually look taller and thinner. I wish. This is it where I parked my car to go to the park, and the trees put out a shadow of dappling the light. And because the angle of the branches go one way, the shadows go another way. And I'm not sure, but I think the shadow is coming from the trees on the right. Or could I be wrong? It's coming from the left. I'm not sure. What do people think?
I don't know. I put everybody on mute.
I'm not sure what it could be
Yeah.
from the trees that are straight above on the left-hand side. Okay, next. This is our familiar green K in the morning, and you see as the perspective changes as you go towards the building that the shadows start getting narrower as you go towards the building. But this is in the morning, and I'm standing pretty close to where I shot the picture, so I got bigger and softer shadows. Next. This is also in the morning, probably in the Grand Loop, where there's a lot of trees. And again, I got stronger shadows, and I caught a person walking, and there's some dappled light on her legs. There's a lot of dappled light. Okay, now we're going towards the middle of the day, and the shadows will change. This is but near the Al-Aqsa Mosque by the Temple Mount. The Western Wall is to your left. And there's a shadow from the sidewalk, from the stones that are on the walkway, you know, on the edges of the walkway. So depending on how big the stone is, and if you're close to it, I was pretty close to the bigger stones that I got bigger, softer shadows. And the ones further back are shorter because I'm further away. But this is midday. And sometimes it's the object itself that, even though it's the middle of the day, that will make for how dark the shadow is if you don't have any other intervening light. Next. This is in the middle of the day, and there are some shadows in the street off to the left. Not too many in this particular one. So you can go to the next one. This is in Safat, and there's some trees in front of me and over the people who are walking, so you get some dappled light, and they're in front. That's in front of the people that are walking, and there happens to be some shadow on that building that was in front of them based on the trees that were nearby. You see that canopy that's near the building. There's some shadowing there based on, I guess, the foliage that's next to it. This is also in Safat in the middle of the day, and the sun is pretty bright, and I'm close to the shadows. So even though it's faint, it's a little bigger for me than the shadows that are further away, but they get lighter as you go further away. Next. Also in Safat, it's the object that makes the shadow on the wall. And this is around the middle of the day or towards mid-afternoon. Okay. This is your page mover is blocking my shadow. I don't know, but the
Sorry.
shadow, there's a shadow at the bottom of the image that goes from the left-hand corner. It starts curving, and then it gets narrower as it goes towards the cars. And your if you can make the image smaller a tiny bit, then you would see it. You can make it smaller.
It's a PDF. I can't.
Okay, all right. Usually you can, because it's plus minus can make it smaller or bigger. See, there you go.
I
Okay, now you
screenshot.
can see the shadow without that being blocked. So there was certain objects in the way that I didn't get in my image that got caught in the shadow. Okay, next. You can, this is from Dappled Light. You could make the image bigger if you want. This is Dappled Light from the tree off to the left. And again, it's around 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that. Because we had just gone to a presentation on the Golan Heights. This is up in the Golan Heights, and I guess it's the names of fallen soldiers, I would think. And you have the shadows that are at the bottom of my image blocked by your, there we go. Okay, by the Dappled Light from trees that are nearby. Okay, next. And it was pretty hazy that day. This is a tank up in the Golan Heights. Now, because it's a pretty big piece of equipment, you get a pretty big shadow, even though it's in the middle of the day. But I was standing as close as I could get with my zoom. You know, I had the Sony RX10 M4, which shoots up to 500 millimeter. So we were up, we were further away, but I used the zoom to get in, and the shadow was pretty big. This is at Rosh Nigra, and there are shadows on the left-hand side at the bottom of the screen. And if you walked further to the left, you could take the elevator down to the caves below, which we couldn't do because it was windy that day. So they didn't let us go down. Next. Okay, now we're getting to the afternoon, and the shadows are gonna be fainter. And I'm in the dog park off Lake Ida Road, and I shot this with probably my 80D, and I felt it was better, the shadows in the black and white. I left the one on the right in 11:4. I'm not sure now. It looks, I don't know, it looks like the one on the left is 11:14, and also that the one on the right is 11:14, but you resized it to fit. The tree gives for the dappled light, but it's not as good a shadow as you would get if you were earlier in the morning when the sun is low, or late in the day when the sun is going down. You can go to the next one. Okay, I have a point and shoot camera that was modified for infrared purposes, and the colors I usually get untouched are blue and gold, but I made this into black and white because I felt you could see the shadows more. But because it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, thereabouts, the shadows are going to be fainter, and the only way you really see them at all as dappled light here and there, let's see, to the left of the fence in the pavement, for example, is if you convert it to black and white. There's a few shadows, dappled light in the sidewalk, but not too many. Okay, go to the next one. Okay, the same park, and you have shadows going across the sidewalk from the trees. And when you shoot an infrared, the trees tend to turn white. And the sky generally, actually they're a light green when they're bluish green, the trees. And the sky is either, depending on the clouds in the sky, you get blue and gold in it. But the trees tend to be white because of the chlorophyll in the tree. This is the same shot. The one on the right is also infrared, is the 3:2 ratio, and it's cropped away on the left, and you have more or less dappled light at this point. Okay, this is shot with a regular camera, and this is looking from where the stop sign is after you've gone through the gate back towards the gate. And actually the shadows look much better in black and white than they do in color. Now shadows can be inside stuff, as Eva was talking about, inside the folds of a garment. They could be inside the confections in this particular nutty confection that was in Akko in Israel. And you have shadows, again, this was the middle of the day, you have shadows where that square, where the confection was cut to make a triangular cut, so to speak. There's some shadows there on the left and on the right of the image that the piece of whatever this thing is, on the plate. There's shadows to the left of it between the underneath. There's a shadow on the confectionery piece that hasn't been cut, dark shadow, and you have some shadows to, beneath and underneath the other confections on the immediate right. Okay, and you have some shadows on that red tablecloth below the main subject. And this was shot with a Sony. This is inside a museum in Honolulu, Hawaii, of a World War II tank. And because of the way the lighting hit the tank, you see shadows beneath the treads on the right-hand side, inside the treads, below the treads, between that teat area that's in the middle of the first tread. You see shadows on the ground. You see shadows just about everywhere within the parts of the tank, the pieces of the tank, and outside of it, even something coming from the right. Now, if you notice the grass that is by the first wheel in the tread that's on the right, the grass looks better when it's shadowed out than when it's on the ground and the light hits it, to the right of the tank. It doesn't have any texture or it's just bland. So wherever the lighting hit to shadow the grass, it gave it a little more texture. Okay, this is, I think, in Taos, New Mexico. That's a picture of a chair from a building, and it's late afternoon, and there's a difference again in how the shadow appears because I cropped it. Okay, now let's go to the evening. All right, this is across the street from my house, and there's some shadowing based on how the sun is hitting the houses. It's tending to silhouette the trees because the sun this is backlit. There appears to be some kind of a shadow in the driveway on the right. Okay, because there isn't the same kind of shadowing on the left. There may be dark areas that are shadowed in between the sidewalk and the beginning of the driveway, as you start going into the garage on the left, the garage on the left, there, right. Okay, but basically the sun is pretty low in the sky. Okay, and the trees are silhouetted, and this is a case where you have a single point, which means I don't have any penumbra, and the sun is pretty low at the end of the day, and the sun got caught in the ocean, and that is a shadow from the sun that got reflected in the ocean. You also have some light coming off at an angle directly below the sun, but that's more highlights, I would think, on directly below and sort of fading out at a from narrow to wide. Go to the next one. There's some shadowing in here from the car, but not much as you get, but most of this is silhouetted out. There's some shadowing in the clouds. Go back a minute. There's some shadowing in the clouds because the sun going down and because the clouds probably happen to be gray. Okay, but mostly this is silhouetted. This is by the Western Wall. I'm not sure if this is coming from the Yaffa Gate or the Dung Gate, but because of the harsh lighting that you have against the Western Wall and the people walking, you tend to get shadows. Okay, let me see, and then we're done, I think, with me.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, we'll take them at the end. It would have just been to make it very long if we did it in the middle. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about chiaroscuro lighting. And it comes from two Latin words, clarus, which is clear or bright, and obscurus, which is dark or obscure. And it's the name of a style of art that was popular during the Renaissance. It's a method of painting which uses a very directional light falling on the subject, and it makes it very, very three-dimensional. I mean, you can see it in this image that it just almost makes it alive. And in this image as well. The light source is often singular, resulting in dark shadows and backgrounds, with the whole scene being highly contrasted between lights and darks, and yet still having information in the dark. So when you look at this image, your eye immediately comes to the baby and to this face, and actually the rim over here. But way in the background, you can see another image, dark, but still visible behind them. So it makes it feel like there's more and more and more in the images, and it makes sort of a modeling, not mottling, but modeling to make the faces appear more rounded and the body parts appear more rounded and fleshy. Today, chiaroscuro photography pays tribute to this same idea, using light to bring attention to one specific area while everything else fades to black. This adds depth, mood, creativity, and flair to images, and it's sometimes called Rembrandt lighting. And not only do you see this in static art, in paintings, but you see this in movies. And I have to tell you that this weekend I watched the movie Mank, M-A-N-K, on Netflix, and it's a black and white, sort of old-fashioned, beautifully photographed. And I kept saying to the person who was with me, oh, look, that's the kind of lighting I'm going to be teaching about. And it's just really, really added this kind of spooky, graphic feeling and added directly to the mood of the movie. So here it's slightly different in the two images based on the intensity of the light, but you can see what it's doing where the light is on this side of the image and there's this direct drop off on the other side of the photograph. This is a still life. So it can be natural or artificial light, and it can be black and white or color, but it tends to be more effective in black and white. So here's some tips, and then I'm going to show you that way to do it. You should use one light source. So it can be natural light coming from a window or an artificial light. And that light source, for the most part, and remember in photography, these are rules or suggestions, but all the rules are meant to be broken. So this can change your image to be what you want it personally. But generally speaking, you shoot with you shoot perpendicular to the direction of the incoming light. So this camera is facing these chess pieces and the light is coming perpendicular from the left. You position the light and directionality as close to the subject as possible, because the light is at closer will be a softer, more diffuse light. The horizontal usually works the best, and you'll see that in my setup. And they also recommend that you do this in a dark toned environment, and you don't want objects in the environment that the light will bounce off of, because that will create light on the other side. So try to remember that when you're setting it up. Choosing a subject with high texture gives you the best results. And you can see here that on these chess pieces, wherever they're carved out, you see like more intimate details. So let me show you what I did. And oh, this is another one, just so you could see that it works with color as well as black and white. And it's a great tool for portraits, a great tool. Okay, so my first setup is a smartphone on a tripod. And let me tell you that this took me days and days and days to figure out how to make this work, because I was trying it in my garage. I had the flashlight on my car, and I couldn't get it to be exactly what I wanted. So I moved the whole setup into the washroom. And this is the tripod I got from Amazon with my smartphone on it. And I had 2 black boards. And just so you know that this club owns boards. We own white and black boards, and we own 2 light boxes. If you ever want to borrow them, they're in my garage and they belong to all of us. I took a small souvenir piece that I had. And actually, I shot 3 things. I shot a baseball. I shot a little bank that I have that my father bought me when I was a little girl, a little wooden bank that looks like a chalet in the Alps. And I shot this. I was trying to see what this lighting effect did on different types of objects. So here's my flashlight balanced on something on the dryer. And here's the object on the washing machine. And I tried to get them at basically the same level. Oops, oh, I forgot that. Then I realized that the light was it was just too intense. And this was the smallest light that I had. Although I'll show you some that I did with candlelight because Miriam suggested that, and that was quite interesting. Anyhow, I took a piece of white cloth and just put it over the end of the flashlight to diffuse the light a little bit. So there's the flashlight. This is when I turned the lights off, what I saw. And I put my finger on the screen of the cell phone to focus and direct my, where I wanted to be able to adjust the light to the darker area of the object. And I waited until this bar said autofocus lock. See, that's what comes up when you're pressing on the spot. That's what comes up. Then you can take your finger off if you want. And then I used the sun on the edge of the square, moving it up and down until I got the exposure that I wanted on the object. Okay, and then I set the timer. I didn't know how to use the remote trigger for this day, and I didn't have time to learn. So I just set the timer at 3 seconds because you don't want to be touching the phone. You want it to be able to be as sharp an image as possible. You don't want to jar it. So you set the timer, you take your hands off, and it fires. By the way, you have the flash turned off for this. Don't forget that. And this is the image that I got. And you can see here, first I had this little doll up on this little square thing, but then it was too high. So I moved it off and I just leaned it up against. But you see what I'm doing here, where the light is shining on the face and dropping off. And so that's just telling you what the setup was. It was in my laundry room. This is the metadata that came off the cell phone. And I thought I got a pretty good result for what I was trying to do. There's the close-up. And you can see that the shadowed area is in here and the light, the direct source is here. Now, this is not a perfect object to do this with, because remember it said try not to use reflecting objects. This is porcelain. And so this picked up more light than I really wanted. But see here with the hand, how the light is directed on one side and shadowed on the other side. And that's what I was trying to do. Okay, so this is my regular camera on a tripod. And this is the candle light. All right, so the same setup. There was a little bit of ambient light. You can do this with a door. Some of the articles that we sent you are really helpful in how to set this up. I did this also on a timer. I did a lot with the exposure compensation. I shot a gazillion images to try to get what I was looking for. But that's see, here's the light, and then it just drops off. So it makes it much more three-dimensional. These little tiny flowers, this thing is like 3 inches high. So you could do this with anything that you have in your house that's pretty, that has dimensionality to it, and it just increases the dimensionality. Look at the little shadows on the rocks on the roof. But the idea here is that it's the light hits part of it, and the candlelight gave it this sort of yellow, this sort of orangish tone, which is a nice warm feeling. Okay, there's the baseball. This is in the garage. I have a wheelchair in my garage that I lend to people. So I opened the wheelchair. I put one board standing up on the back of the wheelchair, one across the arms of the wheelchair. My car is parked over here, and the flashlight was on the trunk, shining. And this is how the setup looked with the lights on. And I turned the lights off, and that's what I got. Again, I had the flashlight with the fabric on it, and I had it at ISO 200. And it was on a timer of 2.5 seconds. Again, you keep you fire, you keep your hands off the camera. It's on a tripod. And then this is that's the final result. But it really gives you a chance to do some really dramatic pictures that really come out really nice. So, you know, in this time when we can't go around to wonderful places, it's just a fun thing to work with in your garage or in your laundry room or any place. You can do it with people and portraits or objects, and food is a great thing. They're suggesting one of the articles that, you know, when you're choosing food and maybe a basket, that it have a lot of texture, and you can see what's happening here, where you can see every single stitch on this baseball and this little extra fuzzy of thread, and that all adds to the dimensionality of the photograph. And that's what makes it special. It's just a baseball on 2 pieces of black wood, but it's a very rich 3-dimensional image because of the lighting and the shadows. And that's what we wanted to teach you today. So let me get out of this screen share in case anybody has any questions. Anybody have a question that you want to ask or a comment? You have to unmute yourself because I went around and muted everybody because you were making noises.
If I want to do this in my laundry room, my new washing machine is higher than my dryer. So I have to put something on the dryer to raise it up so that they're level. Otherwise, the directionality, the light's not going to work.
Right. And I even had to do that because of how I had the tripod set up. I didn't want to adjust it again. So I raised the flashlight up a little bit on a box. But you can use books. You can use whatever you need to get your stuff at the right level. And the candle was just a you know, one of those jar candles that you have in your house that smell good. I just lit it and stuck it next to the object. Okay, any questions? All right, thank you all for coming. I recorded this, so if you missed any part of it and you want to go back, and I recommend that you watch the movie Mank. It's really good. The cinematography is unbelievable. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.